Hi, I'm Zach Jeffries, and welcome to Saskatoon In Focus, where we talk to the people behind the headlines who make Saskatoon work and make Saskatoon the great place that it is. I am pleased to have joining us today the Mayor of Saskatoon, His Worship, Mayor Don Atchison. Welcome.
Good to be with you, Zach.
Well, Don, thanks so much for coming. We really appreciate having you here today as one of our first guests. And we want to start off by, I guess, getting a bit behind the headlines. We all know the issues here in Saskatoon that we're talking about today, but let's get into a little bit about you. Why Saskatoon and why politics?
Well, first of all, I was born and raised in Saskatoon, and then had an opportunity to live in the United States for a few years playing hockey. Had opportunities to be in other places, but Saskatoon was always home, so came back, got involved in our family business. And after that, one night we were sitting down watching the 6 o'clock news, and nominations were closing in 2 days, and my wife Mardell turned to me and said, "I think you should run for civic politics. I think you do a good job." And I was fortunate enough to be elected, and was elected 3 times as a city councillor, and now in my 3rd term as mayor.
So that was back in 1994 that you were first elected to City Council. There was no long-term plan to get into politics or anything, and it was more organic than that, I guess?
I never had any ambitions to be in politics or in civic politics, but it's always interesting. People are always saying, well, why doesn't someone do something about it? And in the business community, businessmen are always, and business people are always saying all the time, well, why aren't we doing something? Why aren't we doing this or doing that? And so I said, well, there's no point just saying why not get out and run? So I did, and the rest became history for me.
I guess so. That's true. So, as mayor, what do you find, I guess, rewarding and frustrating? There are both sides. I know, obviously, we have things in Saskatoon that go well, and you get credit for that sometimes. And when things go poorly, you also, of course, get credit, so to speak.
Yes.
So, on both sides of that issue, you know, how does that, what are things on both sides?
Well, I think, first of all, a lot of the rewarding times are people phoning and just saying thank you, or getting a letter, thank you for your help, or whatever the case might be. Just people out of the blues, just acknowledging the service to the community. I think that's always wonderful. People can talk about other projects and whatever else is happening, but I think that when you get these calls or letters from people, and sometimes being off to grade schools and getting a picture from the kids afterwards, thanking you for coming and reading or telling them about civic politics, I think those are just all wonderful things. And on the other side, about what are the times that aren't so great, I guess the frustrating part becomes when there just aren't enough funds to go around for all the projects you'd like to do. There's infrastructure projects, there's housing projects, there's social programs. We've got our pets and that as well that we'd like to deal with. There's cyclists, pedestrians, motorist issues. There's a whole host of issues that need to be dealt with, and unfortunately there's just not enough dollars to deal with all the issues. So council as a whole just tries to do its level best in putting the dollars where they believe will serve the public the best.
So in talking about issues, I mean, it's nice to know a little bit behind the scenes of how you got into politics, but today we're actually in Saskatoon undergoing a really interesting visioning process called Saskatoon Speaks. I'd like a little bit of background from your perspective as to how that came about and what you hope to accomplish from that process.
Well, I think council always wants to hear from the public. It's interesting, a lot of times you only hear from the politicians at election time. Here in Saskatoon, I think our councillors and the mayor get out there, and we want to deal with the public on an ongoing basis. And what happens is, with Saskatoon Speaks right now, we're planning on the city going from 225,000 people to 500,000 people over the next few years. Well, I just don't think we should just go along willy-nilly and say, well, now we're at 500,000 people, and then look back and say, well, what would we have done different? So why don't we start today and look into the future to see what type of city we'd like to have. And so what we've done is we've gone out there to the public right now. We've had some discussions. People can get on the city's webpage. They can put their comments in, and then we'll gather them, and then we'll carry forward with further discussions and come up with a plan for the future. And I think it's really important because there's so many great topics and concerns that people have that hopefully we can deal with them now, so that they won't fester into larger problems that require excessive amounts of financing into the future. What we just previously talked about, like how do you deal with all these issues, that we can in fact settle some of these issues well in advance.
So the interesting thing, of course, about the process is that you get people on both sides saying, some who feel that it's a great opportunity to make their voice heard about Saskatoon, but of course there have been other people who have said that this is merely an issue of public relations. This, we'll have a nice speech by Peter Mansbridge and everyone will come together for a few hours and say their piece, but ultimately council has kind of already made up their mind, and that Saskatoon's direction has already been set by those that we elect. How would you respond to those people?
Well, I'm disappointed to hear comments like that, because that's certainly not factual at all. What council did was we brought Peter Mansbridge in, first of all, because he wasn't a planner. He wasn't one that said that the whole city should be cyclists and pedestrians, and we didn't bring a planner who said that it should be all motor vehicles. We brought someone in who wasn't a planner, in fact, to help us motivate the discussions and dialogue into the future, and that people, when they left the meeting, couldn't say that there was a bias one way or the other. And I think what Peter Mansbridge's message was, if you want to do your democratic duty, get out and speak and get out and vote. And I think that was what was really important. And when I hear that council's already decided what the future is going to be, council hasn't had those discussions. The only discussions that council has had to this point is basically that we want to get out, meet with the public, hear what their concerns are, and we've already annexed enough land to get to at least 500,000 people. Where are we going to go? So we need to have the input in order for us to have a true vision of what the community is going to look like.
So you mentioned that this is really a process. We've had the major workshops that have gone on at Prairieland Park. Where does it go from here? What's the next step?
Well, the consultants have gone back now, gathered the information, or are still gathering the information. They'll compile all that information, then they'll come back in the next few months, and then they'll talk to us about that again, and then we'll go to the public, and then the process will carry on from there. It's certainly not a short-term process. It takes time to get there, and we'll get there. I'm hoping by the end of next summer we'll have a vision of where the city should be going for 500,000 people.
So when we talk about 500,000 people, I think that's it's a big number for some people to digest. Right now we're at 225,000. What do you see the importance of growth being in Saskatoon? Some people have said, Don Atchison, he's about growth simply for the sake of growth. Why? Why grow Saskatoon? Why make it 500,000 people?
Well, I guess first of all we should go back and we should say, first of all, would we want to be a city that's smaller in size than we are today? I mean, I look at a place like Detroit that was 2 million people, is now 850,000 people, where they've had to demolish and raise entire communities. I don't think that's what we want for our city. On the side of growth, people always say that they want to make sure that their children and grandchildren have opportunities to work within the community, that they don't want them to have to travel throughout the world to find job opportunities. And with growth, you get those opportunities here. The other things that happen is it just grows from there, because people say, well, for example, travel. When we were 100,000 people, we didn't have direct flights to a lot of different communities throughout North America. Now we do, and that'll continue to grow as well. The other things are, it's about density of our community for the future. I believe in higher density, smaller, compact type community, but still with the type of growth that people feel comfortable with. But if we don't have growth, you're actually going backwards. And when you're going backwards, that means that there are fewer job opportunities, because people still have children, there's still immigrants moving to our community, and we want to make sure that everyone has a chance to succeed. And so we were at one time scheduled to be a city as large as Chicago, but that didn't come to fruition. But now we're on the second go around of a community that is going to be very successful and vibrant, and there's lots of reasons for that.
Please join us next week for the conclusion of our interview with Mayor Don Atchison. Thanks for watching Saskatoon in Focus. Connect with us. Find us online at saskatooninfocus.ca. Find us on Twitter, on Facebook, or send us an email, saskatooninfocus@gmail.com. This is your program, and we want your feedback. Together, we can make Saskatoon the best city in the world.